I wanted to say thanks for coming to the program, and you've got a really interesting background. So can you give me a quick 30-second overview before we dive into it?
Sure. I'm a chemical engineer by training, and really entrepreneur. Worked in building a company in the material science space where we used the robotics to discover new materials. So we took the Silicon Valley approach to discovery. We in parallel miniaturized, parallelized, automated experimentation. So we could have robots do what chemists conceived and make, process, and test hundreds to thousands of materials at once. So we call that high throughput research. And I spent 17 years of my life building a company that became a public company named Symyx, doing that. And after that began what is currently my journey today with Thync. And that is in looking at neurotechnologies to really give us all access to built-in biology or abilities we have, and using the neurotech to turn things on or off.
Which is both fascinating fields. I think the coming century is going to be defined by a bit of both. New materials because we need to solve old problems better, and transformations in ourselves, both biologically and then also what you're doing in terms of how can we enhance ourselves on a mechanical or a electric perspective, so to speak. What got you into this? What was the genesis of neuroscience as an interest?
Yeah, for me, I think it was really very simple. I just felt there had to be better ways to access our own abilities without having to take pharmaceuticals or drinks to try to get into certain states or modes. And it just seemed that there must be a way to tap into our nervous system, our brain, and our neurons to really, on demand, call up our best. And that's really it. It was really that very simple idea that led to the creation of Thync and partnering with an amazing team to discover ways to do that.
And it's kind of the analogy of the mom who sees her kid getting crushed by a car and can lift the car, despite the fact that she's the scrawny little lady. There's things inside people they don't realize they have.
Yeah, in fact, well, we know actually we have them, and we know what it feels like to be really driven, really energized. We know what it feels like be completely calm and focused. We know what it feels like to when your memory and you're just sharp and able to do your best. And I think all those moments are there for all of us. They're just not common, at least for most people. People really struggle to find those, to get in the zone really in those different states.
What do you think about the whole transhumanism movement?
Well, I certainly was enamored by it too when years ago when I started to read about it and thought about it in the context of what we do at Thync, which is tapping into the nervous system. We obviously looked at that. I think enhancing human cognition and really the radical visions for it are fascinating. Alongside that, we've seen the rise of AI also in the last 5 to 7 years in particular. And so I think looking at the pace of that and looking at transhumanism and looking at brain hacking technologies and methods that we use and others use, I've gotten, I guess, an overall picture of view of what I think is happening.
And where do you think we're headed with that? Are you in the we're all going to become singularity mindset? Are you worried about AI? What are you worried about, and where do you think we're headed in some of those realms?
Boy, yeah, big topic. I'm definitely not a person who worries that AI will come to life and revolt or rebel against humans. I think if we have to worry about anything is really who is behind the AI, who controls AI, and that's a much more real concern. But AI itself is going to be an amazing tool, and it's going to outpace our ability to enhance people biologically. In other words, AI's abilities are going to exponentially increase at an amazing rate. And for humans, we'll work really hard to give a human being 20%, 30%, 50% better memory, which is a tremendous thing to do. But it just will pale in comparison to what AI will be doing in parallel when it comes to cognitive functions.
It makes me think of, we have a little kid now, a little son, and it makes me think of when he was younger. Thank God he wasn't mobile, because the mind wasn't there to be able to handle the damage that the body could do if the body was bigger. Do you worry about that with humanity, where we're moving into this era where our bodies will be too big for our brains, so to speak? We won't be able to keep up with what we can do.
Again, maybe I'm just not neurotic about it. I do think that the real world limitations of actually doing things and propagating them across millions and billions of people is puts in place natural checks and balances with everyone looking and everyone evaluating, critiquing, and concerned. I just don't see a runaway capability. I think the opposite. I think it's going to be challenging to find those killer apps that we all want to, that are going to be there, of course, for AI. I think it will be challenging to find them and to propagate this so that we're all using AI properly. So I just think there's a lot of heavy lifting. Take any technology, even when it's obvious that we should be developed. It's such a big boulder to carry to take it over the mountain and really make it available for the masses. So I'm all for the investment in AI, the companies behind it, the giant tsunami of effort, of activity that's going on is all really good. It doesn't mean that people are going to, there'll be people abusing it. There'll be companies that don't deserve to be trusted. There'll be a lot of things that happen, but in general, this is a really good thing for the human race.
It is, and I find it interesting. You say AI as if it's a noun, like it's a single thing. But I think about you and I, and we both have different forms of intelligence. Do you think we'll have lots of artificial intelligences in the future? Do you think it'll be something that's more all-encompassing, or will there be personalities and flavors?
Oh, absolutely. I think you're right. It's going to be it's going to be a very diverse set of capabilities. Some very narrow, most very narrow, to do with specific things. And I do also believe in is it Yuval Harari's book? I forget the title, but I think it's 21 lessons for the 21st century. But in general, I think one of them is right, is that the future for the next few decades at least is going to be about the Centaur teams. It's a combination of humans and AI together, and it's not a partnership that's going to be stable, because the AI is going to get better and better, really diminishing the human contribution over time. But it is going to be incredibly powerful across all the different industries, verticals, and applications. So I just believe the combination is going to be great. That's going to be a focus, and people should be looking to that to really advance, AI. And there'll be, like you said, a whole diverse set of capabilities to do that.
Worried about jobs at all?
Sure. I do think there'll be large sectors where jobs will be lost. I think many of those jobs are not jobs that people aspire to have their whole life. They're not the end goal for most people. They're jobs that if we could create other jobs and better jobs, that people would rather do that. So if we take cashiers, or if we even take drivers, there are many people who love those jobs, but in general, people don't grow up to try to be a driver or a cashier for their careers. And so I don't think there's anything wrong with getting rid of those type of jobs, over time.
And a big focus of what you're working on now is self-enhancement, the wearable space. What do you see happening there on some of the cutting edges?
We a little background. We launched the first, what's called mood altering wearable. It was called the Thync Edition 1. It was launched in 2015, and what it was is a wearable device you would place on your forehead on the right side, and you would control it with an app on your phone, and you would choose a program either to energize you or calm you down. And the way that we did a tremendous amount of science and published on this to develop the technology. But what we are doing is really stimulating cranial nerves that are on the neck and head, which are key nerves that connect to the brain. And we're just trying to trigger, influence your autonomic nervous system. So your rest and digest mode versus your fight or flight response. We're just trying to really move you towards one or the other very slightly, and that's what gives you this, relaxation versus energizing feeling. And all it really is, it's a way to trigger your own body's response, which is why it's so healthy and natural. So you do something at a nerve, and it triggers this whole body response, which is which is to get you into the mode that you want to be in. And we did that with this wearable, and it was really ahead of its time for sure. But a huge amount of effort with a tremendous team to get this to the market. We're really proud of it. But that entire experience really shaped our thinking as we saw it in the market, and really taught us a lot about, ways to bring not only wearables, but also any technology like this to market, and what you really need to focus on.
And what is that?
Well, I think it really comes down to keep it simple, stupid. I mean, I can't say it any more simply. But we right now, for example, we took our wearable technology and pulled it from the consumer market and pivoted into healthcare, and are developing it as a therapy. But as far as the consumer market, we went back and then on the side, we developed a really important technology that we're close to launching, which is a patch versus a wearable. So a smart patch. And the reason it's fascinating and the reason it's a big lesson is because a wearable or any medical device is something that you want to give your customer, the end user, a lot of control, so they can pick the program they're going to use, they can pick the intensity and control it while they're using it, and that has been the vision forever. But a patch is the exact opposite, where you preset everything, remove all the buttons. The user doesn't have to learn anything or do anything other than put it on, and then the patch does its fulfills its purpose, which is to energize you or relax you or help you sleep. In the case of our patch, our first patch, it's an energy patch. So we're about to soft launch this awesome product called an energy patch that you just put on behind your ear for 5 minutes. And when you're done with it, you can use it a few times. And then when you're done with it, you just throw it away. And it's really cool. We actually came up with a different brand for it. If people are curious, it's not available, but we're running a beta test right now. And if people are curious, they can go to useyourhead.com. So literally, just like it sounds, useyourhead.com, and you'll see this really cool energy patch concept.
So basically, you're trying to create technical solutions to traditionally biological problems. I'm going to pop some caffeine because I'm exhausted, or the coder over there is going to pop in modafinil so you can concentrate for hours. You're trying to find a more natural solution that's also not natural.
Yeah, it is. It is more natural. And of course, yeah, you're doing something external, so it's not purely natural, but it is more natural to turn your own body's abilities on, with via your nerves. That's a more natural approach. Ultimately, I mean, I would love it if everyone would just be, we would all be Buddhist monks, in the sense that we could control our states at will, and via meditation, put ourselves in the state we want to be in. That is just not practical for people. And so what we're doing with this technology and these patches is really giving people a way just to do that directly.
Speaking of the Buddhist monk thing, I want to do a call out for an app I just found. WeCroak. It's an app that tells you 5 times a day you're going to die. And the science behind it is fascinating in terms of the happiness. And I've been using it for a couple of days now, and I really like it. So if you guys are having trouble with this and can't go sit in a cave, that could be something helpful as well. But how do you look at that role of technology when people are becoming both more dependent and addicted to technology, but there are also those beneficial applications? How do we balance that? Because most of the people that need the balance have no ability to do so.
Yeah, no, I think it's a concern for everyone is how addictive our phones are, and the content on them, and the different things we can do on them, and all of us do it. I mean, I think we can easily spend 8 hours, 10 hours, 12 hours a day on them if we want to. So that part of it, and in general, technology's always been this way, is it does take time to learn how to use something brand new that's important, and it just it does tend to take a few decades at least for people to really learn how to do it. And I am confident we'll learn how to do that too, even with with our phones. But it takes hard lessons, to adjust. And technology is no different. So we'll just learn our lessons and adjust accordingly. But I don't see technology inherently as being good or inherently as being evil. It's developed to be good for the most part by people and people behind it, certainly in the Silicon Valley and startups. My company is one of those companies, and we obviously believe in technology. We believe in improving the world through technology, as corny as that sounds. But we all fundamentally believe that, and we do that. But it is still a tool, and it depends who's driving it for what application and who's implementing it. Has a huge impact on whether it is good or not. And so, I guess I'm all for technology because I believe there are many more positive forces behind it than negative ones.
I would agree. It's a double-edged sword, as is everything. What technologies worry you the most, and why?
A good question. I would say, I would say technologies that allow you to assess and control, that large numbers of people, like their decisions or their states to make decisions or their biases. Anything that centralizes on a very small group of people, I would say that would worry me.
So like social media, news, pretty much what people spend the majority of their days on?
I would say it's a little more advanced, but I think it's more than what we have today. I think it's even more insightful than what we have the ability to do today, coupled with an ability to, again, in a more precise way, make people or bias people towards action in their lives. I think we're getting there, but I don't think we're quite there yet on those capabilities. And it's one thing to have a company in the United States that's publicly traded have that type of access. It's quite another to have a regime in another country do this as a centralized policy under a different political structure. That's a completely different situation. So again, it's really who's behind the technology.
Is it really that different, though? I mean, if the federal government comes to Facebook and says, give us all of your information or we're arresting you, Mark Zuckerberg, that it kind of is the same results, regardless of the means that got there.
I don't know. I guess I don't agree. I think getting information transferred is not the same thing. I think if you really want to do this, you've got to be in command central. It's a dynamic capability. It needs to be done in real time, and it needs to be controlled and managed by whoever's, in the government who wants to do this. Let's say this evil group or aggressive group. So I don't think getting information transferred is enough. I think you have to be behind the driver's seat.
What sci-fi movie do you think we're most headed towards, or book?
That's a good question. I can't say I'm not a pessimist, and all these almost all science fiction books tend to be the really good ones, and that predicted a lot of technologies tend to be really all about a government controlling all people in their lives in different ways. And so I just don't believe in that. So I guess I guess if anything, I'd say we're more like headed towards something like Wall-E.
We are. The Amazon is that company, big and large. Right?
It's. I would say that probably resonates more with me than anything. I think people more and more make the trade-off about being, having instant pleasure when it comes to food and comfort and material goods and all these things being instant and available all the time, and so I think that I do believe that is a trade-off we all, many people are making consciously, to be honest, because they just enjoy their life more like that way, even though it has long-term health issues and long-term, you lose control over your information and other things that have long-term impact. But I just think people honestly enjoy it more, so they do it.
And like a third of the U.S. is obese. At what point do we need to just regulate some of these things and say, okay, you obviously can't decide for yourself?
Yeah, I do think that the fundamental disconnect where health choices have no financial consequences for people over time, that has to change. People do respond to financial choices.
But in the future, would they? It's so extended that it's the same deal of, well, if I have this hamburger today, I won't see it there for a couple of weeks.
Yeah, it's not an easy thing. It's but this is not an isolation. You're right about when it's your life and there's nothing else to consider. Let's say you're young and you just do what you wish. But the truth is, we all live in most of us live in communities where we see friends, family, and you can see what happens to people and what happens because of their choices. And if there are penalties to be paid and hardships to be to be seen and felt more, I think, I don't know, the more real it is to people, the more they'll plan. I do find it fascinating, even with our wearables and our energy patches, when we go try them out with people. There has been really a change. I mean, I think a lot of young people are so much more aware of their health, so much more aware of what they put in their bodies and what they want to do, and of how they see technology. Even now, the news, they're much more aware of the news as well, and to be more alert about what they're reading. And so I think people are just, they're smarter. The younger generation is better equipped, has more information, has more access to, obviously, at will, anything that they need to learn. So I just think I'm more optimistic. I see it. I do think people can change and make choices.
I like it. Speaking of optimism, which technology outside of what we've talked about so far has you most excited, and why? Or which couple?
Well, in the short term, being the next 5 years, I do get excited by some of the AI applications, especially like in the justice system. I think there could be a huge amount of benefit. In general, I would say, I would rather have AI play a bigger role in government in decisions than people. I think we'd get a far better result because there's so much. Yeah, there's so much bias, and by being a politician, you're really difficult to serve your community properly and make the right decisions and keep your job. And so I think the party is the way politics is. I just think an AI program has such a better shot of getting some things right in the criminal system as well. Certainly in terms of really just creating parity, creating real information the judges can act on and do a better job. I think all of it is really transforming for many, many millions of people if it could be done. So I'm excited about that. I'm excited about the area I'm in. I do think that whether it's our company and others, will come along to doing it, this ability to use your nervous system, using technologies to really put yourself into different states, enhance your memory, enhance your energy, trigger your ability to calm down, better sleep. These are all the things that really make a difference, to be honest. We started out with cognitive focus, trying to look at memory, trying to look at learning, which is a great area. But we found that if we really want to impact people, it doesn't transform someone to have a 20% greater working memory. I mean, it could be really useful, and I'd love to do that too. I'd love to have that. But the truth is, I'd rather be energized and driven and motivated when I need to be, and I'd rather be able to sleep well when I want to, and I'd rather be able to calm down when things are really tense, something happens, and I just need to collect myself. I want to be able to relax. Those things are more important to my well-being over time, to making the right decisions, to having the right, the relationships I want, to focusing on the things I want and not do the things that I know will take me off track for my life. But it's really emotional. There's an emotional component you cannot ignore. It's not just cognition. And that emotional component drives and rules us, most of us, our daily lives.
Oh, much more than the intellectual. What
Yeah.
I had a really good question and it just slipped out. Oh no. What was I gonna say? So in terms of that, in terms of okay, that's what it was. Talk to me about the tech. Talk to me about how this actually works and the mechanism of action behind some of these enhancements and
Sure.
some of the stuff you guys are working on.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, one of the things that's challenging about working in neuroscience and neurotech is that even with the most advanced neuroanatomy and neuroscience techniques and knowledge, generally speaking, there's no way to, there's no technique right now where you could look at your nervous system or your brain activity in real time and understand when you make a change, how it changes that nervous activity. You could, of course, open someone up and put electrodes inside them and measure like the activity of a neuron or a nerve. You could put someone in an MRI and get some sense of activity of regions. But there's no real-time feedback about when you do A, what happens to B. And A and B are not just single neurons, but they're pathways and networks that matter and connect together. Very hard to do. There's some amazing tools to do it in animals, though, but there's really nothing in humans yet, at least that I'm aware of. I'm not saying I know everything, so I'm sure there's some cool new technologies I'm not aware of, but I haven't seen them yet in practical use. The reason that's important is because what that does is it turns this into a fundamentally empirical activity where you could use all the neuroscience, all the knowledge to this really about 20% of is that, and 80% is you've got to do the experiments and look and see what happens when you do stimulate a particular area a certain way with a particular waveform. What happens to this network or pathway or person? How do they respond? And so that really is how we, to answer your question of what we do, what we have done to get to our technology is we have to probably run around over 4,000 people over 6 years through about 1,000 different, well, that's not true, probably a few hundred different programs that we, from a group of a few thousand programs that we whittled down to a few hundred. Those few hundred would go through testing in people. And through that testing where we used sham or placebo stimulations, we can see, signals. We can see what's real and what's not real when it pertains to creating an energetic, effect versus a relaxation effect versus a memory effect. And that whole process is what we've done in our company. And it's what led us to the stimulation programs we use today. And so it's a really highly empirical process where you use the best science possible. But in the end, you've just got to try it and do it and do it and do it until you make it better and better and better over time.
What do you think about the biological enhancements that a lot of people are working on these days in terms of prospects, thoughts on ethics, direction, etc.?
Well, can I ask you what you mean by biological enhancement in particular?
So primarily ones that are genome edits. So people that are looking at CRISPR, et cetera, people that are working with in vitro babies. Not so much, obviously there's huge biological impacts for just changing your diet, exercising, et cetera. But the more cutting edge stuff of self-enhancement.
Yes. Well, that, I do think the biggest challenge there is how, talk about empirical. I mean, we basically, in order to master that type of technology, you would have to run a lot of experiments and make a lot of mistakes. And that's what's unethical, because those experiments basically are running on people. And I don't see a way to replace that. I don't see how, you can learn a lot by doing it in a mouse model or other animal models and mastering that over time. And that's important, and that will be necessary to give you the best shot of doing it well in a person. But unless you're dealing with some type of gene edit that is life saving, I don't know how you take the risk that you could basically ruin someone's life to give them a bet to get to enhance them in some particular way. So I don't know how. I haven't thought through enough about it, honestly, Matt. But I will tell you that I think that's where the ethics really come to play. I think we need a better way to do this, to be able to experiment, because there's no way to avoid experimentation. We just don't have, and we will not have, even with the greatest AI. It's not about AI. It's the ability to predict the impact of a gene edit in a human being over the course of years is really, I think, challenging.
I mean, the pharmaceutical industry is a toss-up. They create a drug and then realize, oh, this actually is Viagra. We didn't realize that. We were trying to make something else entirely, and they just see where the positive symptoms are. It makes you think that to do something similar in genetic engineering, you're going to have a lot of tests and have a lot of buried bodies to make it successful.
Yeah, and to be fair, pharmaceuticals, that did happen with Viagra, and that does happen a lot. Drugs that are approved for one thing or being developed for one indication, there's a surprise, and people find that they're useful for something else. For the most part, drugs are developed for a very specific target and a huge amount of work. When you hear this number of $1 billion to develop a drug, it's because they start out with millions of candidates that get screened in vitro, and then they get the best performing binders are optimized with chemistry, and it goes into more advanced models, cellular models maybe, then animal models, and then finally into a person. And that entire chain is incredibly rigorous work, very targeted to cure a particular cancer, a particular type of condition, diabetes, or a central nervous disorder, something. It's very targeted. But the issue is always really the same: is that in a person, when you first put it in people, you are running an experiment, a very restricted, expensive, time-consuming experiment that is on a person, to a group of people, to see what happens if you're right about everything you did ahead of time. And that is what makes pharmaceutical research so risky, that we still don't do, we don't succeed enough in people, given the amount of work we do ahead of time. And that is a fundamental issue with pharma research, which is why, again, when you ask about gene editing, this is the fundamental problem with gene editing as well. It's, we just don't have, with as much knowledge as we have about our bodies, it is not yet possible to predict the impact of changing protein levels, and introducing a new foreign agent in the body, or doing something that's specific even, that you think it's so specific, and still there are other ramifications, because there's so many interdependencies in the human body. So I think all of that will be overcome, but it shouldn't be overcome at the risk of, at the expense of people's lives, of many people's lives.
But it probably will be. In primarily authoritarian regimes, I got to imagine that would be the best place to try this. China specifically, like World War II, Russia sent soldiers to the front lines without guns. Grab one from your fallen comrades. Is that going to be a situation where Western democracies can't keep up because they have a stronger guideline of ethics?
Well, I think the countries without ethics would only pursue these type of solutions aggressively if it gives them some type of short-term, like, dramatic advantage. So if the prize is worth it politically, worth the effort, they'll do it. I don't know. So far, I don't think we've seen anything like that. So extending life is not a political. It's not something that a political regime, a communist regime, or a dictatorial regime would find as something they have to have for their regime, no matter what. But I guess I don't see that. This is what I mean. I think that the check and balance here is that you need to have an application, set of applications that are worth that type of dramatic effort by a dictatorial regime. And I don't know what that would be yet, and whether they have the wherewithal to really pull that off, even if they knew. So yeah, we'll face these things. I think there are a lot of bad people in the world, so people will come up with these crazy schemes, but we'll, there are a lot of gates and checks to make sure it doesn't become something that the masses have to worry about.
I'm more worried about good people with good intentions that go awry than bad people personally, because everyone that's trying to do something like this justifies it to themselves, arguably for good reasons.
Oh, I think everyone. I don't think it doesn't matter who you are. Yeah, you always believe in what you're doing, and you always believe you are right and morally right. People wonder how, say terrorists do what they do. Well, they do it because they believe they're fundamentally correct. So they believe they're righteous and they have the right path. So there's no doubt you're right about that. That happens in every single situation. People will have their version of what their beliefs and why they're on the right side of history.
Do you believe or do you ascribe to the human being just a machine type feel? Or are you someone that has some type of belief in a consciousness? Humans are inherently different than what an AI would be.
Oh, definitely the latter. I think if we are in the end machines, then AI will do it better than we can ever do it in this century, for sure. So I think we'll discover what it is to be human. Really, AI is going to help us do that because it will take away a lot of the layers that we put on, we have now that we believe are human, but are machine-like, and it will leave us with what it actually means to be human versus the best AI, capability in the world. So I'm definitely the latter, the camp of the latter.
I wonder if being human could just be to be imperfect. Art is something that you create for no efficient reason. It's just something that's enjoyed because it's not needed. I wonder if being
Yeah,
human is something similar.
I agree. I mean, I think again, the emotional component, the spirit, if you will, the emotional component of being human is what's clearly going to set us apart in a major way. AI has no reason to feel, and even if it learns how to interpret feelings. I'm not saying AI can be quite good at pattern recognition. It will be able to really see how people feel and detect when someone's angry versus happy versus excited versus disgusted. I'm not so much that, but I think the actual act of feeling something and living your life based on a combination of cognition and emotions that come together, that is what being human in part is about. And I don't see why AI would ever go in that direction and try to replicate that.
I would agree, but I also don't see why it wouldn't. So we'll have to see.
I don't think it has any. I don't. Well, it's up to us. We make it, so it's a matter of who someone wants to. I think trying to having AI mimic a human being is a waste of time. People will try it, but I don't think it's going to really accomplish anything. AI will do have its own track, and it's not about copying a human.
I think that's probably a better way to go, especially with the uncanny valley being what it is. What's it like? Is it frustrating being a physical product type entrepreneur in a world where SaaS is so much easier and cheaper? Because can that be troubling sometimes for raising money?
Sure. Yeah. No. We had a tremendous challenge always about when you have physical products, it's much more difficult. But as I think entrepreneurs learn is you really need to adapt, and this is how we went from a really high-end wearable device that's super high tech to a patch that is still has a lot of technology in it, but is something that's much more like software than it is hardware, in the sense that let's take a patch, not just our patch, but in general, you can take any patch which is a sensor, etc. Patches are in between hardware and software because you can change them on a time scale of, let's say, 6 to 8 weeks. You can make changes to a patch in terms of form factor and materials and design, all types of things. And in our case, we could change our programs that we use for stimulation, etc. But software, you can change in the order of weeks depending on what it is, and hardware, like a wearable, that takes more like 9 to 15 months to do. So 9 to 15 months to really change a wearable, you've got to redesign it and relaunch a product. So the reason I say this, all of this, is because you know, it is true that you want to have more flexibility, which is why we gravitated. That's one of the reasons we gravitated to a patch versus a wearable. But there are a lot of important lessons in why software businesses are much easier to fund, and I think hardware groups have to take those lessons and take them deadly serious. Like, really incorporate them into how they run their company and why choices are made. Not to say that you should exit hardware, but when you do hardware, you have to really be aware of all of this ahead of time. And I don't mean the fundraising. I mean, be aware of the trade-offs between hardware and software and why you want to choose a certain direction. And I think most teams don't do that. Most teams you have hardware engineers that fall in love with hardware and the idea of launching a particular type of product, and they do not stop to really look at some of the fundamental issues. If they did, they would change how they design the product, and they would still be a physical product, but they would take a different approach.
Yeah, like Fitbit's a cool company, but it's not a great company because they don't actually make that much money. They can sell you one, maybe two or three once they break.
Yeah, it's a tough business. It's a really tough business. They've done a great job to build their company, and that to be relevant in the future and provide things that we really get excited about. That's a tall order. So it's not it's easier, I would say, from the stands to cheer or critique. It's I've been through it. We came up with this patch, which I know is the right technology and approach, but I was leading a group of 50 people launching a wearable, first of its kind, and for me to stop that and never launch it and retool the company and fire people and sort of pivot into a patch would have been the right thing if it were. Now, we didn't know that at the time, but let's say it was a possibility. It would have been the right decision, but almost impossible to do when you have built something from scratch. You've hired everybody. Your investors are behind you. Everybody's excited about the amazing wearable you're going to launch. It's almost impossible to stop something once it's off and going, because if it's your mission, everyone's behind that mission. And I've seen it so many times, not only with myself, but in other companies. It's really blinders once you get going, because if you don't, nobody believes in what you're doing except you and your team. And if you start doubting what you're doing and start to change it in a fundamental way, well, then what's left, right? What's left? That's how it feels when you're in this gigantic race trying to come up with something brand new that's pioneering. So one of the biggest lessons, though, for all entrepreneurs, and at least in the area I'm in, is really, it is, as a CEO and the leadership team really needs to, look hard at these very basic models of software versus disposables versus hardware, and not just, and really understand the hard trade-offs between them, and really force yourself to innovate, to find the solution that will not require you to swim upstream across 3 or 4 major facets of a go-to-market. That is all seems obvious. Like when I'm talking and some, this is super obvious. Why doesn't everyone just do this? Do you even need to say it? Well, I'm here to tell you that you do need to say it, because again, it's really important what I'm trying to say is, it's really important once you get started down a certain path to always reevaluate and to not be afraid to completely change that path if you realize that there are some basic issues. And so I don't know how to say it in more specific ways, because I'm so vague the way I'm talking. I feel like I'm just rambling, but maybe if we go into specific stories, it's a way to explain some of this. Otherwise it just seems too generic.
Basically, you can hamstring your company by building the wrong business model. But what do you do when the wrong business model is the right thing to do? For instance, if you look today at a lot of the companies getting funding, I mean, I do some angel investing. How many of them are another photo sharing app? Do we really need another photo sharing app? How do we handle the fact that the alignment isn't quite there structurally to make some of the things that the world needs in a hugely profitable way?
Yeah, that is a major issue. The world does need a number of, it needs innovation in third world countries, it needs innovation for the environment, it needs innovation in certain aspects of healthcare and neglected diseases, and in areas where venture funding is not going to appear. And what that means is that it's unlikely that one company will be able to find a particular solution all the way through. In other words, invent it, translate it, and commercialize it. What will happen over time is people will find pieces of the puzzles for every particular problem. And it will take a lot longer, but those technologies, those pieces will float in the ether and get picked up by other people who will add more to it. And over time, more to it will be added. Eventually, there'll be some nucleation between someone in the future and what's been done to complete something, and then that will go forward because it's got, it's very close to the goal line in terms of being something practical. So it will get some funding from somebody, and then it goes forward. So the process is it's much more random. It takes a lot more time. It's like diffusion versus, actually having a current behind you taking you somewhere. So it hurts all of us in the meantime because we would like to have that solution, but we don't have it. But that's the way it will go. And in some areas, you can't afford that time. So in environmental solutions, you can't afford to let it maybe be random over time and have it evolve because our Earth is, suffering. So it will take gigantic efforts to innovate in that area at some point that are organized and funded. But in a lot of other areas, it's okay. It's okay that it takes longer. It's just there's no other way at the moment. It's the best way.
What was it like taking a company public?
Oh, exciting! I mean, it's a strange but really exciting process. You basically go see about 80 people in 2 weeks, and you get 20, 30 minutes with each one. You pitch your company, answer questions, and move on. You get to do it at dinners, you get to do it at lunches, you get to do it in larger group settings, and it's a process where you have to create a lot of demand quickly, and then things are great. And if you don't, then what happens is you've now spent $1 million, 90 days, told the whole world that you're doing it, and then the day comes when you price. And so that's why you see people price below the range, or below expectations, because they don't have a choice. So the investors at that point, the bankers are trying to help you, but really at that point, the investors have the ability to get, to ask for what they want, and you really have no choice other than to back off and not do a public offering, which is at that point a little bit insane to do. So that's why you see companies, price below market. Luckily, in our case, in our company, that didn't happen. It was my first company, Symyx. We didn't have that problem, but you see it all the time. And if you're oversubscribed, you have a lot of demand, then things are great, and you price, very strongly.
What do you think about all the unicorns that held off going public for so long, and a lot of them are now going public this year? What do you think about that staying private longer?
Well, it's really about the founding team and really communicating clearly with employees. There's definitely a trade-off. I'd say most of those unicorns would have preferred, I would think, to have gone public when they were in a high growth rate. All of those companies went from, let's call it tens of millions of dollars to hundreds of millions or billions. And in that trajectory, that would have been the time to go public. And it's simple. It makes life a lot easier for the company to go public in that kind of situation. But when things are really going well and you're growing quickly, you feel like it's never going to end, and there's no need to go through the pain and all the downsides of being a public company. And so I understand why people don't want to do it early and why they want to wait. However, if you wait until your growth has slowed down, you just made your life a lot more complicated. And eventually, employees need liquidity and investors need liquidity. So it becomes an important, if you're private, it becomes a major part of what a CEO has to do is to get them that liquidity. I don't mean by IPO, it can be by bringing new investors in and having a secondary market basically for your shares created so people can have some liquidity. But that takes a lot of effort also. And so I would say, again, I think most companies, I've met CEOs who've told me this for all types of businesses, they really missed the window during their highest growth period, and they shouldn't have done that.
Well, no one retires on top when it comes to the NBA, the NFL, anything. It's
Right.
almost all of them need to be hit around a couple times first.
But these are significant companies that deserve to go public, and it's great to see them do that.
And you're incredibly excited because there's going to be like 1,000 new millionaires in the Bay Area thanks to this year. So there's funding in case you need it.
Yeah, that actually causes more problems than good around here. But actually, I'm excited because I'm just excited by for the economy, for the area, for the fields they're in. We need more and more innovation, obviously, more and more success. For every success that there's out there, there will be 10,000 attempts that are funded, and that's really the engine of innovation, is the fact that all these attempts are being funded in ventures, and that I'm a big believer in that. So I love to see success because I know it brings more capital, and a lot more tinkering, a lot more shots on goal for technology.
If you had to get out of your industry today, neuroscience, and you also had to avoid AI, what field would you go into and start a company, or what company would you join?
Oh, well, I would. I guess if we're going to get practical, I would say I would probably try to move into some of the medical healthcare areas where technology and services together are really innovating. There's some places where some radically new things can be done with services where you're really taking by taking a service, a procedure, out of a practice and making it a service in some way. You basically centralize it, make it much more cost effective, much more patient friendly, and actually help the physicians because they're bogged down with so many different things they're doing that they love to get help in doing certain procedures, doing certain things in a better way. So I think there's a lot to be done in healthcare to improve just the quality of the health and the cost to bring it down. That'd be a great area to go into. Of course, the technologist in me would love to get into some of the biology that you mentioned, the gene editing of these things, but that's because you want to go into that frontier. Be pretty amazing to do with the right team and the right applications only. But it's a long haul. I think in particular, I think extending life is a big topic. It is pretty fascinating that some of the pathways people have found now to extend life, that with a single molecule, you can do things that no one ever imagined would be possible in animals. And so there's always this prospect of can we figure that out for a person? So that's an entirely new frontier that's really exciting and fraught with the ethical dilemmas we talked about earlier. But fascinating.
Yeah, fascinating nonetheless. I have one last question for you, Isy, and that's if you had to leave people with one thing, a quote, a call to action, what would it be and why, before you tell them where to find you?
A call to action. I mean, I have to say, I mean, out of context is so hard, but I think for entrepreneurs, I do believe that whatever the core, the core invention, the core ability, the core capability that you have in yourself and your team, your venture, I think it's really important to persevere and realize that it is really about getting through the desert in many of these ventures, and that in order to do that and come out the other side, you have to be willing to reevaluate everything except your core, the core proposition you're delivering. And how you deliver it, and when and where and with whom, are all things that need to be checked all the time. And hard decisions have to be made, but you shouldn't be afraid to make them. So my main message is persevere at all costs, which is not a new message. I think we've all heard that. But having done that in companies, I can tell you it's not common for people to persevere.
Yeah, you took one on the chin. What was it like going through that, and how'd you manage?
Well, we even in companies that succeed, my first company that succeeded, we took it on the chin on the way to success. I think whether you succeed or fail, you are met with severe challenges along the way, and in this company in Thync, we basically failed with our first rodeo, and then for our second rodeo had to survive to get to a second rodeo, to really almost now invent the third rodeo. It is again, out of context. There's no general rule. All I can say is I do believe that it forges, it reveals character, and it forces. You really see who the gladiators are who survive in these battles in entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is not for everybody. I know that now. I know why, because you have moments when it's just heartbreaking. I had to let go of 40 people out of 50 in one day. These are all people who are amazing, who did everything I ever asked them to do. And you get to a point where something's not working, and you realize that there is no saving the company unless you radically shrink. And when you're studying a business, I didn't go to business school, but if you're doing a business case, business study, business school study, it's easy to analyze these things when you're really removed. But the reason people are not entrepreneurs is because you have to be willing to lay it all on the line when no one believes it, build it all up, tear it all down, be humbled by it, rebuild it in a different way. Those kind of things really test you. And not just you. It's not, when I say me, I mean, I would never have gone to where I am without the teams that we work with right together. So it's not just having you stick it out, but you have to get other people to stick it out with you. So it's a really, I think, great thing. People should persevere, and the only advice I have is persevere, but do not repeat. Persevere in a very different way, and find a way to succeed, but a radically different way than you did before.
And
advice.
And know when you have to take it out back and shoot it, because it's just not going to be able to float the boat, so to speak. Isy, this has been a good one. I'm sure it's been informative and fun for people. If people want to find out more about you and how you're changing the world, where can they do it?
Our company Thync is spelled Thync. So we have a website, and again, I mentioned that we're launching this really cool product soon. And if people want to learn about it, they can go to useyourhead.com.
And that's basically a caffeine boost without the caffeine hooked to your head.
Yeah, clean energy, no crash. Yeah, do it electrically. It certainly is the future. So people should try it. It's fun.
It certainly is. You just better get us there. That's our challenge for you.
We will. Totally.
Awesome. Thanks for coming on, Isy. And thanks for tuning in, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, cheers. Check out Isy's stuff. And if you got something to add, then reach out to him or reach out to us. Until next time, have a good one. Cheers.